I'm recording you all, so just be on your best behavior. As Andrew said, my name is Chris Marianetti. I founded an organization called Found Sound Nation. And before I get into kind of what we do, I want to tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from. When I was a kid growing up, I was obsessed with the piano. I started playing at a very, very, very young age, and I was playing pretty much all the time I could get. This right there, that's pretty much what my house sounded like 6 hours a day. So I think a lot of parents are trying to get their kids, like, how can I get my kid to practice? My parents were trying to get me to stop playing the piano. Like everything they could do, they were like, how can we get this kid to stop? So, I took really the traditional route, and I went to music school, I went to conservatory, I went to Italy, and I studied composition and electronic music. And the whole time I really found myself, while I was really engaged intellectually, and I was really stimulated with what was happening compositionally and all of that, I found myself missing something. I found myself really disconnected, and I wondered why and what I could do about that. And so a couple years ago, I'm living in New York now, and a couple years ago I meet a woman, and that's another story. She says to me, well, okay, I'm working at this school in the Bronx, and it's really falling apart. The kids aren't going to school. Do you think you could come and do something musical? Music is good. Can you do something for the school? And I said, well, I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe, So I took my recording studio, my mobile my home studio, and I wrapped it up and I brought it all to the Bronx. My recorder, my sound equipment, all of that. And what I found was that kids were already really engaged in the music making process. And I took out my recorder and I started recording them. That's a sample there from that first project. And what I found was that once I started recording these kids and playing it back for them, there was this amazing kind of feedback loop that started happening. Kids started opening up, talking, sharing, and we started making this album. And then at that point, the kind of composer in me kicked in and said, okay, well, this unfettered creativity is great, but there needs to be some type of limitation, some type of structure. And so I said, okay, well, anything that goes in this album needs to be recorded and produced and created in this shared communal space, right? So then what started to happen was, after we got really tired of transforming pen clicks into hip-hop beats, we started bringing in outside musicians. So I invited, a jazz saxophone player. I invited a classical musician to come in. And we started really collaborating with these amazing young musicians in New York. And we kept working on the album, it kept going, kids kind of kept coming, more kids started showing up to school so they could come to this class. And then somehow our demo got into the Broadway community, and I don't know if folks know the show Rent. Does people know Rent? Well, the star from Rent started coming up to the Bronx and singing and working with these kids. And so all of a sudden, this kind of magical community started being created through these recordings and through this music process. And I thought, well, this is really something. We really could build on this. And so at that point, my friend and co-founder we decided to found this organization, Found Sound Nation. And we partnered with a new music organization, Bang on a Can. We started working with Carnegie Hall, going into prisons and connecting with Carnegie Hall level musicians and artists. That was a clip right there. We went to Africa and worked with young poets around HIV and AIDS and stigmatization. We went to Switzerland and created these mobile street studios, which connected this really classical music festival with the kind of international community in Lucerne. And we kept kind of growing and growing. And now we are trying to expand further. We're creating an online community in the form of a music game. It's called Telephonesis. And really what it is, it's like playing the game of telephone, but for composers and producers. And the way it works is, I create something, and I pass it on to the next person, and the next person can only hear what the person before them created, and only has 72 hours to create it. So what you get, instead of creating an album, you really have the musical transformation of an idea across a series of kind of self-curated artists. And there'll be a mobile app, and there'll be an online platform. And we're working now with the Department of State to produce an international music festival. And we're kind of moving on and going from there. And if there's one last thing that I want to say is that, and that we've based our organization around, is to never really underestimate the power of this right here, this little kind of old technological tool of the microphone, to really build bridges and connect communities. And that's what we've based our organization around. Thank you very much.